Hello and welcome to the Mighty Oaks Show. My name is Jeremy Stolniker. I'm the Executive Director of the Mighty Oaks Foundation and thankful to have you with us. We've had some great conversations over the last several weeks and looking forward to a great conversation today with our friend Jon Lowry. And if you've been following our show, you've probably heard Jon before. Jon was our very first guest on the Mighty Oaks Show. And that was back in the olden days.
No,
like 6 months ago.
That's awesome. 6 months ago,
So,
the beginning of the year.
Yeah, it was awesome. And that's a great start. But Jon and I have been friends for a while now, a few years, and really ministry friends, working together. And it's been great just to see what God has done, I think, in both of our lives, both of our organizations, and the things that He allows us to do. And I want to have Jon back on and talk about some things that are important. But before we get into that, if you have not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do that. If you're listening somewhere else, maybe you're listening on Mojo, that's awesome. Listening at the podcast, that's awesome as well. If you're listening in either of those places, go to YouTube and check out our channel. Tons of content there. We put our show there, of course, but just tons of content. I think just about every day we're putting a new video of some kind up, and all of that is intended to help you. All of that is provided by supporters like yourself who allow us to do this, and we'd love to share that with you. So subscribe there if you haven't yet. Hit the bell, the notification bell. That lets you know when new content comes online, and that would be awesome. Jon is the director of, program director for Serving USA.
Correct.
And you spend a lot of time focusing on prisons and rehabilitation and a lot of other things as a program director.
Correct.
I want to talk to you about a couple things. One, why do you work with prisoners? So that's one thing I would like to talk about. The other one, just talking about how a relationship with God brings about rehabilitation, and it's long-lasting rehabilitation.
Okay.
That would be another thing. And I'd like to get your perspective on hope, talking about hope. What is hope, and where does hope come from, and how can we have hope, even in difficult circumstances and difficult situations. But before we get to those things, maybe start by telling us about Serving USA, about your role at Serving USA. We have a lot of partners here at Mighty Oaks, but our strongest partner, our deepest partner, kind of our go-to-battle with partner is
right.
Serving USA. I mean, if we have someone we're locked arms with, it's you guys. And it's a long-standing relationship. Wayne Hughes has supported us, and Skyrose Ranch, where we do our program, is Serving USA property and manages that and allows us to be there. So talk about Serving USA. We know what we do there, but what is the breadth of that, and what are you guys involved in?
Serving USA has what we call 3 legs to our stool. We have veterans programs.
Yep.
We have in-prison programs, which is called the Urban Ministry Institute. Yeah. So the acronym is TUMI, TUMI.
Yeah.
And then we also work with women coming out of domestic violence and human trafficking. So those are our 3 legs to our stool. We do that through a small group of us that work for Serving USA. There are 3 of us that are program directors. We have Stephanie Borges, who oversees the women's programmings for us. And then in Northern California, I have a counterpart, which is David Wesley, and he oversees the in-prison as well as working with any veteran contacts that are out there, and domestic violence and human trafficking also, because we overlap in our services. But he does everything from Bakersfield north, and he does Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Wyoming. And then
it's a huge territory.
It's a huge territory, but we do it well, so it's good.
Sure.
And then myself, I do everything from Bakersfield South, Texas, Arizona. I do part of Louisiana. I'm picking up. Our boss is in Tennessee. Our vice president is there, so I assist with Tennessee. And he's looking, I believe, at Ohio also. So we're kind of spread out with what we do. But as a program director, it is my job to work with the organizations that we financially support to better their programming, to better their management skills, their fundraising skills, and their overall effectiveness of what they do for their programming. And we do that through a series of different supports that we provide. You have individual support from myself or other program directors, as well as our vice president and president, who come and we do support to them. We do trainings, etc. with them. But then we also have Simon Cross, which is a company that we pay for to work with some of our organizations. We choose 6 each year that we fund Simon Cross to come in and teach them with everything from putting together a good board to having HR, human resources or any management type style issues that they would come to, as well as grant writing, seeking additional funding. And then we have Stacy Devine, who is she runs a fundraising organization, and we'll pick 6 organizations that work with her, and she boosts up their fundraising impact that they have to streamline what they do for fundraising. You think about man hours that go in for how much money is raised, and she'll come in and say, well, here's a better way to do it to get more buck for your bang, which is very good. Even like training center down here, we have a November 4th golf tournament that's coming up, and it's a crazy way to raise money, but it's more marketing than it is money, because there's for a whole year they're working towards this golf tournament, so you've got a lot of man hours and stuff, and through silent auction and through people that buy foursomes and sponsors, they're going to walk away with probably $35,000-$40,000, where if you would have high impact donors that are willing to write a larger check, you could do a private dinner with a group of 6, take couples and have a dinner where it takes you maybe 20 hours of work, labor, to do a delivery and pay for a dinner to have a higher return for your hours. So we try and teach things like that, identify who can support the various organizations, etc. And I get to do that as a program director, and I love it.
That's awesome. Yeah, we would not be the organization we are without serving USA. Started out serving California. Maybe I'll ask you to talk about that transition a little bit, but certainly we're at a place, I think, where we have that support internally, and we've been able to develop that. But for a number of years, that was not the case. It was serving California, serving USA, coming alongside, and really equipping us to do that. I think the interesting thing about nonprofits that people don't understand is most nonprofit leaders are not business leaders.
Correct.
They're people with a heart to help others, and they want to do the ministry work. They want to, whatever their thing is, whether it's women or children or prisoners or whatever the thing is. They have a heart to help. They know how to help. They know how to do that. But the rest of it is not something they're equipped to do necessarily. And yet it takes money, and this is something that people have a hard time with. When you're a nonprofit, it takes money. That's the fuel in the engine, right? That keeps the thing moving. And so you have folks who have the best of intentions. They're super passionate. They work really hard, but they may not know how to do the other stuff. And that's where you guys come alongside and really equip people to do that.
It's just like looking at church. They say, I think what they say is 1% of the church does 90% of the work.
Right.
And it's the same out here. We have organizations that they've been looking at a need. They see a need, and that need is not necessarily being filled. So here you have a group of people that will come together and say, well, we're going to fulfill this need. We're going to deal with veterans that have post-traumatic stress. So let's do that. Okay. And they get this group of guys that come together, and as veterans, you have a much higher form of education than most, because the military has mandated that you learn. And all. Now take that into the faith world. The faith world will say, let's work with veterans that have post-traumatic stress. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to pray for them. We're going to teach them the Bible. We're going to have studies. And they're in a realm they don't know. So 2 things happen is, okay, how are you going to fund this? Oh, well, God will provide. Well, God says, He hears your prayer and He tells you to go, so you need to do things. And one of the first things I tell people that are looking to start, whether it's a transitional house, sober living, or in-prison programming, or working with veterans or women in human trafficking, it doesn't matter. I tell them, sit down and tell me what it's going to cost you. Tell me what it costs for 1 year, because I'm going to tell you, for the first 6 months you're going to be on a learning curve, and your money's just going out the window. You must spend that money. And then after that 6 months, that first 6 months, you'll have a small idea of what you're doing, and you need to start searching for supporters, because those that initially supported you, they did it out of kindness to the person who's doing it. Maybe not in
they supported you because you're doing a thing,
not what you're doing. And so I tell them, get me a 1 year cost. What's that budget look like there? And then we need to add 20%, because you don't even know what you're talking about. and so
I love the encouragement.
Well,
that's
encouraging.
That's the thing about you that I love.
No, because I'm encouraging there by pushing that envelope and saying,
it is encouraging to say, this is how it is.
Yes, this is how it is. And so that support has to be their financial support. And to get long-term financial support, there not only has to be belief in what you can do, but belief in your skills to do that. You have to have the skills to execute what you hope to do. Okay? So a lot of times you find out, well, they don't know how to handle money. They don't know how to do grant writing. They don't even have the proper etiquette to approach businesses to get them as sponsors. So how do we build that up?
Yeah.
That's what we get to work with people and train them to do, and to support them while they do it. We do it side by side. But that's very hard in the nonprofit world.
Yes.
It's extremely hard. You can have the greatest idea with the greatest of faith, but even God wants you to be surrounded by people that give you wisdom. So you have to be humble enough in yourself to seek that wisdom and to say, I don't know, how do I do this?
Yeah.
And that's where successes come. And we see all the time, you know, whether it's a church that starts or a organization that grows out of a church, we see them grow up and die.
Yep.
And no one even wants to know why they died. And that's a huge problem to me. I want to know why.
Yeah.
I want to know where the damage occurred so that we can cut that off for those that we believe in and those that we support.
It's incredible. I'm sure you do, as I do. I talk to a lot of folks who want to start nonprofits, who have a pretty good idea. And I'm sure you have these same conversations. And someone will call and say, I've got this idea, I want to get your advice. That's how the conversation normally starts.
Yes.
And then they'll spend 45 minutes telling you what they're going to do. And then you'll say, well, I love what you're about. I think that's great. I think you can do that, but here's some thoughts. That will go for about 4.5 minutes. And then they'll jump in and tell you again what they're going to do, and then they move on. I think there is a misnomer that if you work really, really hard, and you're really passionate, and you really love Jesus, that this thing is going to work.
No.
I think that has led more people down that path of going, how did we get here?
Yeah.
Because it's what you said. You have to have those things, but you also have to be humble enough to say, I need help.
Yes.
And there are some people that can help me, but I have to listen to them.
Yeah. And the damage that's done for others who want to do what you attempt to do and fail, there's damage then. They don't want to do it. It causes, being involved in nonprofits puts stress on family.
Yeah.
Puts stress on yourself.
Sure.
It puts stress on your finances. I'm always amazed. It's kind of like when someone's looking for a pastor for a church. Our pastor's leaving, we need a new pastor, and they look nationwide because they're looking at all these resumes from across the country. And my question is, well, why haven't you already trained someone in the church to be the pastor? Because then that person knows the church, knows everything, and they should roll in there. And the truth of the matter is, no one in there wants to be the pastor because there's a cost.
Right.
Like Dietrich Bonhoeffer's, there's a cost to discipleship. Yeah. There's a cost to jumping into nonprofits or into faith organizations. There's a cost.
Yeah.
People have to give up maybe better paying jobs with better benefits and retirement, etc., than what they would get here. I'll tell you right now, if you're going to run a reentry or a sober living or a reentry or a drug and alcohol program facility, or even a women's transitional to come out of human trafficking, you're pretty much guaranteed you're not going to have a 401k.
Right.
You're not going to have much of a paycheck because most of the funding is going to have to go to the operations. And myself, I would be telling my wife, honey, I need to take a cut and pay to do what I want to do. And she's going to tell me, well, we already owe this much on the mortgage and this much on the vehicles. Sure. So there's a lot of things that come into this discussion when you're looking at that. That's why I'm that brutal, honest guy of tell me what it's going to cost. Because good intentions, I love the saying, hell's paved with good intentions.
The road to hell.
Your hell can be here trying to do something good.
And you have the best of intentions, and you're a great person.
And it's just not working.
It's not working.
So you have to learn. I went to Texas and went down to Houston. We have a partner in Houston, and he wants to open up, I think, 3 more facilities and do 3 more programs that are in the prisons there. And I had a real good talk with him, and he said, well, it's going to take this much money. And he said, but, you know, if I can get approved for this much money by my supporters, he said something that no one has ever told me before, Jeremy. He said, but I don't want the money given to me till I say, here's a start date. And I was shocked. He didn't want the money for the big plan. He wanted the money available
Right.
upon execution of that plan. And I had so much respect for this man because he had looked and he had said, this is what it's going to be. So let's say he was asking for $20,000. He didn't need $20,000 right now, because what if only 2 of those sites would have started?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he wanted to be responsible and respectful to what God has provided to that organization. And there's like 61 organizations we fund. No one has ever said that to me. And I love him to death for that.
Right.
Because that sparked the whole discussion among ourselves. Because even as a foundation, we have funded some organizations that don't produce what they've said. And so, as a Christian, yes, there's grace and there's forgiveness and there's encouragement and all that, but we are responsible for the funds that are given to us that we give out to others.
100%.
And if we forget that and we're doing a friendship or it's all good, then I'm failing everybody we're trying to work with. So it's interesting, which you open a can of worms.
I don't know about nonprofits generally, but there are something like 44,000 nonprofits focused on veterans in the United States. 44,000. Now, all the other nonprofits, I can't imagine how many there are. Some of them do very, very good work. Some of them not so good. But there is a finite amount of money available to the tens of thousands of folks who are trying to do good work. How does the organization determine these are the 60 organizations that we're going to support?
Okay.
What's the vetting process like on that?
Well, let me tell you, Wayne Hughes is our guy. He's the creator of this.
Yeah.
He has a heart of gold, and he told me something very profound one time. We were down looking at an organization, and Wayne came himself, and I had asked him your question. How are we deciding these things? And he said. He said, everywhere you step in life, you step on a need. But you must be able to determine where you can have the greatest impact on that need. Okay? So what we do is, what we have done, and it's changing a little bit for 2021, is we would have organizations that would submit a grant proposal to us, and they'd say, this is who we are, this is what we want to do, and we determined whether it was in our guidelines, in our mission.
Right.
And we would then decide how much money we had and how we could best utilize that money to these organizations. So let's say we got 200 grant proposals, just as a number out there, and we would only fund 50 of them, because we went and met with them, we talked with them, we talked to the people inside their programs. We wanted to see how they're doing and what is different about them that makes an impact that might not be reached within our mission statement. And that's how the funding would be determined. This next cycle, which will be for 2021, because we're already processed our 2020s, we're going to require a letter of intent. We want you to submit a letter of intent to us that gives us a program overview of what you do, what your finances are like, who your supporters are, etc. And we're going to look at that, and that's going to determine whether or not you're in our our purview of what we're doing for ministry. And if you're not, you're going to get a letter back saying, thank you, you don't fit within our mission statement,
Sure.
Appreciate it. That takes away the need for me to go sit down and do a face-to-face and spend hours doing that, and travel expenses, etc. So there's going to be that. Then there are going to be those that are left that receive a letter back saying, okay, we would like to know more about your organization. Go ahead and put in your grant proposal. So they'll put in the grant proposal, and we'll start reviewing those again. Great organization up in Corona put in a proposal for a decent amount of money, a reasonable amount of money. I went and spoke with them, and for my view, they don't fit in what are my responsibilities.
They're doing great work.
Great,
It just
awesome
doesn't fit
job.
with the mission of
Doesn't
serving
fit,
USA.
Right,
Yeah.
doesn't fit. So what I tell them is, here's my card, you have my number, my email and everything. Here's some people that we work with or people that I know. Here's their contacts. Let's start networking, because I will still support what you do, just our organization can't support it financially. So there's many that occur like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it works. It works for us.
It has to be a very deliberate process. I think sometimes people starting are so passionate about what they do, they're almost blinded to the fact that there is a lot of need, that everywhere you step there is a need.
Yes.
But the organizations who are funding that really need to go, well, where can we best steward the resources that God has given to us?
Sure. And then you also have organizations that once they get a funding organization like us, they feel as if we're always there.
Sure.
And now we're creating a legacy program for our partners that we're going to wean out. Do I need to, not Mighty Oaks, but do I need to fund Training Center in San Diego? Do I need to fund them for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years? No.
Right.
My intent in working with them as a program director is to teach them self-sufficiency, to teach them to go after the money and to manage their program and to grow at a rate that is sustainable, and that they're able to do that. Then I don't need to give them as much money. I can wean them off. And when we're done with them, we will still provide them with the database service, with the support for their marketing, their management training, all that. We'll still support them with that, but that's not a financial cost.
And they're
out
a
of
much
us.
more stable organization now because they're not dependent on one or just a couple of funding sources.
That's right.
They've got relationships.
That's
in
right.
a lot of places. Yeah.
That's right.
Can you talk briefly? We've kind of gotten off track, but
That's okay.
But it's so interesting, and I think there are a lot of people that watch what we do as an organization, Mighty Oaks, and because I get the calls, and they want to do something similar or something, and they wonder how all this works. What was the impetus for going from serving California, which is what the organization was for a number of years, to serving USA? It's not just a name change.
No.
That had real implications.
There, jokingly, I'll say it's Texas because California is rough. No, but
You're only half joking.
Yeah, just half. The drive is, we're still looking at that issue that I tell you having a great impact, okay? And look who we deal with. Veterans. Veterans are the ones that give me, myself, my freedoms to say and do what I want to do within the laws and the rights of the United States. So I have great respect for veterans. My entire family's veterans. I'm the only one that got in trouble and stuff. But
You have a son who was in the Marine Corps?
I have a son. He just came out as a sergeant, and he walked right into a great job. But so the veterans we support. Now, how do you best support veterans? Like you said, there's 44,000 plus veteran nonprofits out there. Who do you pick? So we picked Mighty Oaks as a star. I'll call you a star child.
We are our stars, really.
You are
We
stars.
would be the gold
you rock.
standard,
That's
if you will.
Right. Because we sat down and we determined after interviewing and talking to you guys, nobody just threw money, walked up to you and gave you money.
Right.
They said, what do you do? What are your plans? Because it's not just what do you do. Where do you want to be 5 years from now?
Sure.
What is it you want to do? And so Mighty Oaks started very small.
That's right.
And Mighty Oaks has grown and has that impact across the country.
Right. And we have a very close relationship with Serving USA.
Yes, you do.
You've graduated from our program.
Yes.
You came and observed and watched and participated. Many folks from the organization. So we have a very close relationship. So it's not just, this is fine, go do that.
No, because it's a belief. It's a real belief in what you do. And this is with all of our partners. We believe in what our partners do. So, we have the veterans, women with human trafficking. That's still growing. Domestic violence and human trafficking work hand in hand.
Incredible need.
And it's a huge need. And this is a learning process for us, though. So Stephanie, who oversees that part of it as a program director, she's been out there for a couple of years, even finding out where and who does the best so that we can have that greatest impact. And it is something. We're involved with law enforcement. We're involved with the prison systems, the county jails, the district attorneys, the politicians, everybody just in human trafficking and domestic violence, because it touches such a huge portion of our society.
Right.
And you can't just say I'm going to deal with domestic violence, because who are the victims of domestic violence? Veterans, prostitutes, drug users, ex-offenders, everybody. So you can't just say here's this big scope. She has to whittle it down.
Right.
And she's doing a great job.
Yeah.
And then in prisons, we support one program which is the Urban Ministry Institute. The reason we support it is, at one time California had like a 72% recidivism rate, the rate of going back to prison for someone who's released. 72%. If you ran a corporation like that, you'd be in jail your own self. But right now they're saying it's 40-something%, and I think that that's a little skewed, because those that get out on probation are no longer tracked by parole, and those that are extradited are considered gone, and they come back. So there's a buffer zone in there for them. So let's add another 20% there at 62% recidivism rate. They track, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation tracks for 3 years whether or not an offender comes back. Serving USA tracks our students who take the Urban Ministry Institute inside a prison. We track them for 5 years. And we have last I looked, it was 4.8% recidivism.
Incredible.
And when we started this, it started when myself and Clef Irby, who's our vice president, when we worked for Prison Fellowship. He had met a man named Don Davis, who created the Urban Ministry Institute, and he said, well, how can I get it in the prisons? And so Clef did one of those small dinner fundraisers, and with $75,000 we piloted it here in California, in Southern California prisons. And directly after that is when I was hired with Prison Fellowship, and I watched it grow to well above 20 states that it's in, because the prison systems want something that changed the society on the prison yard, as well as cuts recidivism. Now, Serving USA only funds Toomey in California in the original manner, which is we fund Prison Fellowship field directors find the volunteers that are delivering the program inside the prisons. Then Serving USA, we fund transitional housing and program housing people on the outside for the people that parole out. Okay?
Toomey graduates? Or
Toomey graduates. Well, they don't have to be a graduate. You have to do 4 modules. If you've completed 4 modules, then you're full backing for your reentry services. So that's what we do in California. Now, when we became Serving USA, we said we need a different model for out here. So what we do now is we find those that want to or do deliver to me, and we pay for the curriculum. So we take that financial burden off of them. But we don't just pay for the curriculum. We provide them with a database, the management training, the fundraising, the HR training, all that board development, everything, we provide them with that.
Right.
So we've found organizations that are doing what's within our mission, and we fund them. And so, in those 3 areas, that's how we do that, and it's quite fascinating to me to see the impact. I went to, like I said, I just came back from Houston not too long ago, and I went into the prison, and the class was fascinating to me. I walked in, and they were doing a final exam. So everybody's quiet, they don't talk. They're all doing their exam. They turn in their exam, and the facilitator is checking the test to come back. So I grabbed the pile of tests, and I'm looking through them, and because I'm picking out the one question that everybody misses. Okay, because there's always one question most people miss. And so when it's done, he said, well, he asked me, what is it, Charles was his name, he asked me, he said, well, what are you looking for? I said, I'm looking at a fact is what I'm looking at. Why did they miss this question? And the fact of the matter is reading comprehension, not the question itself. They did not comprehend the question. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, let me ask it different when the test is done. So when everybody was done, I asked the same question delivered with different verbiage, and everybody had the right answer. And I said, because they weren't comprehending. So even what we do inside the prison, it goes beyond just, are you doing Toomey? Are you doing this curriculum? Because it's not a Bible study, it's 32 college credits. It comes out of Wheaton College. It's called the Capstone Curriculum. It is not easy. But you've got guys that are Christians who think, oh yeah, I'll just pray over the test and I already know it and I heard it so I can answer it. But when's the last time you went to DMV? You go to DMV and you think, oh yeah, I've been driving 20 years, I've got this down. You do the test and you miss 6 and you're like, oh God, what happened? It's because you're not comprehending the question.
And if literacy is a struggle that you've had, education, those things, it's not intelligence.
No.
It's just you don't have the tools to
You don't have the tools to do it.
accomplish it, yeah.
So what do you do with those people when they come out of prison? They're going to go get a job, hopefully, and they're not going to do well at the job because they're not going to understand what they're supposed to do.
Right.
So, I mean, these are layers upon layers of what Serving USA does. But Serving USA, you know, we grew and became Serving USA because there was a need, and we want national impact. The United States of America is the greatest country on the face of the earth, and this country has been suffering from a moral and social decay for decades. And we're watching right now, the Bible says, you know, there'll be times when what's good is be called evil and what is evil be called good. And that is the norm out there now.
That's where we live right now.
And if, I know you wanted to get to this later, but if you don't morally rehabilitate a person, whether it's a veteran, someone from human trafficking, someone out of domestic violence, or someone from prison, if you don't morally rehabilitate that person and teach them to renew their mind, they're still in the same place.
So hold that thought, and I'll frame it this way. When you talk about women and children, you talk about domestic violence or sexual abuse or trafficking and those things, my heart says we need to do something to help with that. My daughter, who's 19, she did an internship with Teen Challenge at the beginning of the year, and you work with Teen Challenge, and did a great internship with their ministry institute, and one of the things she did was she worked with the area of human trafficking in that, and you know, it changed her, right? Because she saw that. I get that. We all want to support our veterans. We want to do that and other people. But when it comes to prisoners, people who are in the system, I think as Americans we have a hard time generally understanding why would we want to work with prisoners. They've done something wrong. Now, your story, where you came from, we did that. You talked about that. And I would encourage anyone who hasn't seen that to go watch that episode. Maybe, Michael, we can even link to that so people can find that. So you came out of the prison system, you worked for Prison Fellowship, you've been involved in this your whole adult life, and you believe in working with prisoners. So why should we care about working with prisoners? And I don't mean it that coldly. You know how I feel about that.
Oh, no, I
but
asked.
Explain that.
No, I asked the same question.
And we've done a lot of work with prisoners too.
You've
facilitated that. I believe in it, but why should we do that?
I went to a Home Depot to buy some stuff for the prison one time. I was buying some tables we needed for the classroom. And the manager cracked me up. He said, "What are these tables for?" I said, "It was for the prison." He goes, "Aren't you afraid of those guys?" I said, "They all used to live next door to you." And his eyes got like that big, like, oh no. I said, "Yeah, they used to live next door to you. Now they're in prison." So I'll guarantee you that whatever they did to get to prison was only one piece of what they'd been doing while they lived next door to you.
Right.
So don't look at these guys like, oh my gosh, you know, there's a lot going on in our society, in our own communities, and our own families. But I'll do like a metaphor here. We all know what the ripple effect is. You take a rock and you throw it in a pond, and there's the ripples that go out, and that's the effect of that rock hitting the pond and making those ripples. And that's how crime is described quite often. You know, a crime occurs and you've got victims, you've got financials, you've got emotional things, you've got everything going on from these ripples that occur. But you have to wonder, where's that rock? And that rock actually goes down to the bottom of that pond and is stuck in the muck in that pond. Okay, and that's what I look at the prisons like. You've been thrown in here, and there's this ripple effect of all the damage you've done to family and friends and court systems, taxpayers, you name it. There's damage to people you don't even know. But that rock is down in that mud. And somebody needs to reach down there and get that rock and pull it back up. And you think about this, if I reach down into a pond and I grab a rock and I'm pulling it up, that water is washing off that muck that's stuck to it as it's coming up. That's the ministry part. While they're in prison, still underwater, they need to have that ministry to them to wash them with the water of the Word, to clean their heart and their soul, to morally rehabilitate that person so that when that person comes up and comes out of prison, what happens when I pull that rock out of the water? There's another ripple series that goes. And that ripple series needs to be positive ripples. A father has to become a father to his children.
Yeah.
A mother needs to be a mother to her children. Someone that's been a drug addict, a thief, a robber, whatever you want to name in there, needs to come out a better, cleaned up person out of there. California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation is a misnomer, because rehabilitation, do you know the definition of rehabilitation?
Probably not.
To rehabilitate is to put back in its original state, okay? Like you restore a car.
We don't want to do that.
No, you don't want to do that, because if you do that,
Right.
oh my, wait a minute, here's a $10,000 thing. If you rehabilitate someone, you're saying that that person is now restored to his or her original status in the society. Second Amendment rights, do they get those?
Right.
Should they vote?
Right.
Should they serve on a jury? And what about a sex offender? Oh my God, where should that person be able to live? What about that prostitute? Don't let her near my husband. Well, you ought to worry about your husband, because it's not her.
Sure.
He's the client.
Right.
Okay? But all these things come to my mind. Now, I just recently met with a Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation administrator, and she was telling me she's got like 19 years, I think it is, in the department. And she was a custody staff before. Now she's what's called a community resource manager. She's a liaison between the community and what resources she can bring into the prison for the prisoners. And she was telling me, you know, she never got it. She never understood why anybody would waste any time on that inmate. Why do you waste time on that guy? Because look at him. Look what he did. He's here. He's here to be punished. Let him be punished. And that's reasonable. Someone hurt someone in my family.
Yep.
I have a saying,
Sure.
it's on. You know, it's
Sure.
like, please don't do that, you know. But she was at a graduation. They have graduations for guys that get their GED, high school, business services, vocational, college, etc. And this affluential Asian family came in. And she goes, I knew, you could tell by the way they wear clothes and how comfortable they are.
Sure.
They're just affluential, you know. They've come from another country. They've worked very hard. They're successful here. They have pride in their family. And it was a mother and her other son, but their one son was graduating. And he was the top graduate, so he got to give a speech.
That's cool.
And he started talking about, you know, this is where I've ended up, and this is what I've done. And he kept that real short, and I like that, because I hate boasting about crimes. He said, I did this, and this is where I'm at. He says, but since I've been here, I've gotten my GED, I've gotten these vocational certificates, I've graduated from these classes, now I'm getting my master's degree. Wow. And I did this for my mother and my brother who's sitting there. Because I want them to know that there's better things to do in life than to be in here. But regardless of where you end up, you still need to do your very best. And she goes, I got it then. It's not about him. It's about what impact he has. Yeah. So that's why I do what I do. Yeah. I obviously care about and absolutely love the people that I work with.
Sure.
But for me, it's business. There's people in the prison system that have known me for 35 years, and I come in and I'm not their friend when I come in. I'm there to do a job, and my job is very serious to me. I tell people all the time, you want to do life on the installment plan? You want to keep doing crime and coming back? Right. That's on you. Do it. Don't waste my time and don't waste my resources. Yeah. But if you want help, I will do everything I can to help you. And it's because I'm back to that rock coming up out of there. What happened to me personally? I was brought up by people around me, which means other people in the prison. They did that ministering to me. They did that washing and changing my thought patterns. They got me out of gangs. They got me out of drugs. They got me out of all that and supported me. And I was shocked that so little outside support came in. So that's why I do what I do. When I paroled, I told them I will be back with programs that will be able to provide positive attitude changes for everybody in here. The wardens appreciate that. Things that I do and a couple partners that I work with there, we've cut violence down on the yards. We've cut gang affiliations down on the yards. We've worked with some guys that have been called in for suicide intervention. And I'm shocked. I'm not an employee. Why are you calling me? They said, because I want to talk to you. Yeah. And this is what's important to me. Now, having worked with these people for 21 years, I've been home 21 years, I now see so many who have gotten out that are still doing tremendously well. And I think those are the stories that should be spoken about.
That's not what we talk about.
No. Here's a guy, 38 years in prison, life without the possibility of parole. He had killed his father. His father used to beat the kids and all that. So he got a guy and they killed his father and he got life without. That's cool. You know, that was the law. Well, the governor 2 years ago commuted that sentence to 25 to life because in 38 years in prison, he had one single disciplinary report, which was his cellie had a tattoo gun. But while in prison, college degree, family therapist, alcohol drug counselor. He worked with the inmates. He created academic tracking systems for the Department of Corrections. He did all these things. And the governor said, I'll let you talk to the board of prison terms and let them decide whether or not you've earned getting out. Well, he paroled. And he got out and he came down here to San Diego. And the parole agents were like, okay, you're the first life without we've gotten. What do we do with you? And he says, you do whatever you want because I do what I'm told. And so we worked with them for a little while, and it was less than 3 months. I think it was 81 days after he got out, I took him back to prison. On parole, lifer, I took him to the same prison that he did most of his time at, which was Calipat, to speak at a graduation. And he was talking to the families that were there. And he said, I want to tell you, he said, I did 38 years and here's my achievements, you know, school, academics, everything else that I've done. And he said, and why did I do that? I was supposed to die in prison. There's no reason for me to do that. People that are doing life sentences do programs and academics so that when they go to the board, they look good. But this man was never going to go to the board. And he said, why did I do that? He said, I did it so I'd be a better father to my children, a better husband to my wife, and a better person in the community I live. So now he lives in Ohio. He's been interviewed for jobs with the Department of Corrections in Ohio, and life is good.
Yeah.
And these are success stories that I love to see. But where did it start? Moral rehabilitation.
Yeah.
How you think. So that's why I do what I do. I could talk to you for 4 or 5 hours about that.
I talk about legacy a lot. That's our program's called the Legacy Program. We speak on legacy and teach on legacy. I think the most vivid picture of legacy I have in my mind was one of the programs you brought us into to teach at Centinela. I taught a legacy class, which to guys who are there without the opportunity of parole, it's an interesting situation to be sure. And for whatever reason, because I'm not smart, I said, raise your hand if a family member that was close to you was in prison before you. And just about every guy raised their hand.
I remember.
The guy who was sitting, 2 tables back right in front of me, he said, because when you're in that environment, they don't raise their hand or anything. They just say what they're going to say. Right?
Yeah.
And he said, I had my dad's parole officer when I was out, or probation officer.
Probation officer.
And my son now has my probation officer. And when I think about legacy in the negative sense, that's the picture that always comes to my mind. And that's what you're saying. You can change that.
You can change that. You need to. There's a pipeline that feeds the judicial system, and that pipeline starts with family. Yeah. Okay, that's where it starts. I go to prisons where there's father and son on the same yard, in the same cell.
Incredible.
And it's not incredible to me.
It's incredible.
Because the dad was the example to the child as the child grew up.
Sure.
And then when the dad's gone, the neighborhood is his example. And so it's natural. I mean, an animal runs with its own kind. And humans run with their own kind, which is meaning social standard. Sure. And it's not shocking to me. What's shocking to me is the acceptance of that. I mean, people understand, this is my 8-year-old son. He's going to get jumped in a gang when he turns 10. And that's acceptable. And I don't understand that. Or, mom is a prostitute and dad's a heroin dealer and dad's in the prison right now and we're taking our kids to go visit him because mom's going to sneak drugs into him hidden in her body. And that's acceptable. And that's not to me.
That's right. That
That is absolutely not. Even in the prison, we had one guy overdose on drugs. He had swallowed a balloon of drugs that he had smuggled in, and it popped and he overdosed and died. And the church, because he went to church in prison, all the guys wanted to do like a wake for him, you know. Let's do this celebration of life. And they go, "Will you come and talk?" I go, "You don't want me to talk." And they're like, "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, anyway, I went in, and they said, "Well, you know, speak on his behalf." And I didn't. I said, "Let me look at all of you guys sitting out here. Every one of you are responsible for his death. Every one of you, you're in a small yard, there's a couple of hundred guys on the yard, and every one of you knew he was smuggling drugs and selling drugs, and none of you did what it took to get him off of it and to stop him. So when that balloon popped, you murdered him." And I turned around and walked out. Haven't been invited back since. But that's the truth to me.
It is the truth.
Because how can you tell somebody, and especially Christians, "I love you, brother." How can I tell you I love you and let you continue to do what you do? I don't care if you're offended that I challenge you at what you're doing, but I'm not going to be chased away because you're offended either.
Sure.
Because you're my brother.
Yeah.
And I understand if you die, you're going to heaven. That's good. But why do you have to leave that legacy? So these are reasons why I do what I do.
Yeah.
It's very important to me. I meet someone on the streets. You know, I'm in the supermarket and somebody's just having a bad day. That person's important to me because that person is going to pay it forward somehow. And that's why I do what I do.
Yeah. How important is the gospel to this process?
Without it, you have nothing. There's no basis to anything unless you have the gospel in there. There must be an acceptance of Christ, a surrender to what he teaches. I do weddings also. I'm a pastor, so I do weddings. And I always tell everybody,
you look like a pastor,
I look like a pastor, amen. I tell every single bride and groom, I said, whether you believe in God or not, I'm going to tell you this right now. There's a love chapter, and it starts with 2 foundational stones. Love is patient, love is kind. And if you don't have that, you're not going to go anywhere. And they go, "Well, where do you get that?" Boom. You're going to learn it from God, because as you read the rest of 1 Corinthians 13, it tells you all the attributes of God. And it says, God, and love never fails. I said, but the reality is you're going to fail. Go back to patience and kindness. I'm patient with you that you failed, and I'm going to be kind to you and not throw it in your face.
In spite of the
but we are sure going to go work through this. And that's, you know, the gospel has to be there. I never, ever would be where I'm at right now if it wasn't for God. 100%. I could not BS my way into this. I could not, you think 21 years I've done this. I've been home 21 years. And I did it inside the prison too, since 1989. So since 1989, I've been under a microscope. People expect me to fail. Oh, that's that guy from the prison. Just like a guy from the military that's been that rambunctious guy, that rowdy guy. You expect him to be like that his whole life. People expect me to fail. My greatest joy, my second greatest joy when I die, besides seeing Jesus, is going to be that they're going to have to admit that I didn't get in trouble. You know, I'm passive aggressive. I will drop dead to prove a point. But it's that moral rehabilitation that starts with the gospel, understanding that I think the biggest message I ever heard was on Father's Day, that I have a Father in heaven who loves me. You know, my dad did not know how to love a kid. My dad taught me how not to be a father. But I have a Father in heaven that loves me, that corrects me, that forgives me, that guides me, that teaches me my entire life. And if I hadn't accepted Christ, I never would have known that. Because in prison, you go to the county jail and people sneak in tobacco. And you always want a little pocket Bible, those little pocket Bibles, because the paper's real thin and you can roll cigarettes out of it and smoke it. That's what a Bible was worth to me for years. But without that gospel, you have nothing. Nothing at all.
You have no foundation to build a life on.
No, and you live in fear and you're living a lie. You're living a hypocrite. Because God doesn't want you to be where you're at. He wants you to be with Him, doing what He wants you to do with power and authority. Not as a name it and claim it, but someone who's studied to prove himself a workman that need not be ashamed, rightfully dividing the Word of God. Same as we talked about 501c3s, nonprofits. Do it right. Do it right. You learn that from God.
That's right. That's incredible. So connected to that, kind of last question leading out, when we talk about hope, probably the most hopeless place I've been personally would be, the times you've taken us into prison and talking to people. It's just hopeless. Now, we then talk to a lot of people who have a lot of hope and joy, even in their relationship with Christ, even in that situation. But what do you just say to someone who you've spent a lot of time in a hopeless place, around hopeless people, not just prisoners, but people who are without hope? What do you say to them? How do you help them understand there is hope, and what do you point them to?
Outside of prison first, I have a friend right now that broke his collarbone in Italy, and they gave him like a figure-8 thing and told him walk around like this for 40 days and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I mean, the bone was about that far apart, and there was a third piece floating.
Wow.
So he came back here to the United States, and it took till just 2 weeks ago to get the surgery. So he's been walking around in shock, in pain, not getting sleep, and he's ADHD anyway, so he had like panic attacks, you know? And he called out, and he called and he said, here's the total of the phone conversation. My wife and I were eating dinner. I picked up the phone. I said, hey, what's up? He said, can you come, please? I said, I'll be right there, and hung up because I heard it in him. And I got to his house, and he's there, and he's like, John, I want to kill myself. I said, I can't do this. I want to just kill myself. I'm having an anxiety attack, and I just can't do it. Everything's falling apart all around me. And I said, well, just sit down. Let's talk. And I remember his collarbone's still broken and stuff. I can't hug him or nothing because I squeeze hard. But I just started talking to him. And I talk in a monotone voice to him because he needs to sleep. And he's sitting there, his legs going like this, and he's like looking, his phone dings, and he picks it up. And I'm like, just shut your eyes, take some breaths for a minute, take 2 breaths for me, just take 2 breaths. He does like half breaths. I said, keep your eyes closed. I said, when I'm talking to you, I want you to listen to me. And I reached out and I touched like from his, right above his knee down, and went like that. And I said, don't open your eyes. And I just kept talking to him. And what I did is I took his mind off of here to why do you touch me?
Right,
you know,
right.
My wife's there, so it was all good. But
Nothing weird going on.
But I know to give that distraction. And I started talking to him, and he finally went to sleep. And when he went to sleep, I turned his phone off. I wanted to kill that phone because every time it dings, you got to pick it up and look at it. And so for 20 minutes he's sleeping. Then he woke up again, and I started talking to him. What I talked to him about, I said, listen, what is it you do? And he said, well, I work with drug and alcohol rehab, and I'm a pastor, and all. And people would be shocked that a pastor would go through this, but he wanted to commit suicide. And I said, so what are your duties? What are your responsibilities? What is it for your family? I said, what is your main priority? He said, my daughter. I said, okay, so let's talk about your daughter. Your priority is your daughter. If you give in to these thoughts, what do you do to your daughter? And it broke him. So I came back the next day, and I was talking to him. I said, let's make a worry list. Because you think there's no hope. That's why he has anxiety. There's no hope. Yeah. Let's make an anxiety list. Let's make a worry list. So he wrote down like 7 things. And the first one's a daughter, and next one was his place of business, and then these little funky things. And I said, okay. I looked at him. I said, did you pray about these? He said, yeah. He said, I'm praying about them, but they're still there. I said, do you know why? He said, why? I said, because there's no action plan. I said, let's take the first one. And I called to his daughter. She was there in the room. I said, hey, what's your #1 job when your dad's going through this? She said, not get in trouble in school, do my best, be there somewhere. I said, that's done, ching. I said, you don't got to worry about that. She's got it. Right. He's like, you're right. I said, now look at work. I said, so you have 3 people. You have a CEO, you have, these 3 people. I said, let's do these emails to them right now and tell them exactly what's going on and delegate to them and take that away from you. It's off your plate. So we did that. Then the next thing was rent and car payments, financials, because we do that. Yep. And I said, I started to walk through them. I said, well, how much is your rent? He said, well, I've got X amount of dollars in the bank. I said, well, then you don't even need these on here. He had like 10 grand in the bank. I said, you don't even need they're paid. I said, so here's your list and here's your action list. The only thing you need to take action on was what you considered your business, which is ministry. And it has people there that you delegate it to that you believe in. So when I run into someone who says they have no hope, I tell them, why am I here? I ask that question. If there's no hope, why am I here?
Why are we talking?
Why are we even talking? Because you want hope. That's why. You want something that is a light at the end of a tunnel. So let's draw it out of that person. And that's what hope is. Yeah. I was in segregation. I spent 4 years in segregation because they had taken all the gang members off the prison's yards, and they put us in segregation. Segregation was pure hell. There was a point where a group of us had decided we were going to cut the ends of our little fingers off and write our letters to the governor and mail them out to him, you know? Just stupid stuff, because there's desperation. But in the middle of that 4 years, towards the end of it, but in all that, having no hope of ever getting out, because they told us, you will be segregated till the day you parole or die. So in the middle of that, somebody wrote me a letter about Jesus. And they said, I don't know you, I've never met you, but God put it on my heart to write to you, and this is what God wants you to know. And I looked at that and I said, what kind of crackpot stuff is this? Who is this? And I wrote back and said, you know, who are you? What is this? And it started this conversation. And I didn't know, but I was mad at God.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, one day I got really pushed by this person because they kept sending me this Christian garbage. And I'd throw it away and just answer the letter because I'm getting mail, you know. And I told that person, I said, I like dogs more than people. And here's why. People are backstabbers. Because I'm in a dark place. I said, I don't, you know, you talk bad about each other. You're hypocrites. Everything that I was, I wrote down on that paper. And I sent that letter back.
That's funny.
And a week later, I got this single-page letter. I thought for sure it was like, okay, bye. But in it was a tract about Barry the heroic dog, which led me to the Lord. Because I had to be able to relate to something. So hope comes in many different avenues. My hope came in a story about a rescue dog that was saving a guy out in the snow. The man stabbed the dog. The dog went back to the owner, and I was mad they stabbed the dog, and that the guy stabbed the dog. And the man followed the blood and came back and found the guy. And that was the big story. But in reality, there's a trail of blood that leads to Calvary. And that was my hope. So hope is the only thing that keeps any of us alive, whether you're a believer or not. You hope for a better job. You hope for a better car, a better girlfriend. I hope I get a good dinner. Homeless person hopes I get enough to buy a shot of dope so I don't feel it, or buy a beer. Hope is what drives us. We need to find that hope that is going to change you forever.
Yes.
And that is the gospel.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Right.
Nothing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you, John. We could talk for probably like 2 more hours.
Cheers.
We'll do, we'll do it again sometime.
There
It's
you
coffee.
go.
It's only coffee in here.
Mine's water.
Or water.
I didn't get coffee.
We'll do it again. Maybe 6 more months.
Sure.
Every 6 months we'll just revisit it.
I appreciate it. And anyone who listens, listen to all the podcasts, but anyone who listens, you know, you're a veteran listening and you're struggling, you're having a hard time, or you're just looking for some hope. Call and talk to Jeremy or whoever's here. People answer the phone. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Don't shut a door, because if you shut a door, all you've done is chosen to be alone. And there's all kinds of people around you that love you and care for you.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things we talk about hope. People feel like no one cares about me. And both of us are engaged in the work of caring for people that think no one cares about them.
Yeah.
There really are people. And man. Awesome.
And our greatest payment is when someone responds.
Yes.
I mean, we get a huge smile on our face and in our heart, and we're able to say, wow, I'm needed by this person.
Yeah.
And that person that you go to minister to work with, always ends up feeding us more than we feed them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't put a price tag on that.
No, you
It's
cannot.
about paying it forward, investing in someone, and them investing in others.
That's right.
And carrying it forward. Awesome. Thank you, John. Thank you for watching. And again, if you're listening somewhere else, incredible partners at Mojo, great podcast. Anywhere you're listening, we're thankful for it. If you have not gotten on the YouTube page, or you're there right now, get on the YouTube channel and subscribe, hit the notification bell. That lets you know when new things come online. And we're thankful to provide this content for you. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch up with you next time.